I'll now take the sediment by roll call. Councillor Alec Allison is present. Councillor Robert Brown.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Maureen Chalmers.
Present.
Councillor Jerry Convery.
Present, Stuart.
Councillor Craig is present. Councillor Maureen Devlin is also present. Councillor Joe Fagan.
Here.
Councillors Katie Loudon and John Ross are also present. Councillor Jared Walk.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've also noted the officers who are present, and I understand that a member of the press is also present for today's proceedings. Thank you, and I'll now pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you very much, Stuart. We'll start off with item 1, which is a declaration of interest. Are there any declarations? I'm not seeing any hands raised. I take it there are no declarations. Can we move on to item 2, minutes of the previous meeting? Are there any colleague have any anything from the previous minutes they would like to bring up? No. Can I move the minutes as a proper record?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. We go on to items for consideration. The first of these is item 3, the annual performance spotlights. And can I ask Tom to give us a report on this, please?
Thanks, Chair. First of all, an apology. I see myself on screen and it looks like I'm in some kind of witness protection programme. I couldn't get the lights on this morning. Apologies for that. It spares you looking at me, if nothing else. This report, as the Chair said, it brings before you, as we do every year, some of the highlights of our public performance reporting. In this case, it's infographics. They go with our suite of annual performance spotlights. Now, the background will remind you of how the public performance reporting has evolved over the years. And we've got to the point now where, as you know, we now have this kind of top layer of information that we find very publicly accessible. These spotlights are kind of bite-sized web content performance information with various bits and pieces to give people a starting point at the very least for the information that they require. In this case, a case study, these infographics, and links, importantly, to other related material for those who wish to dig a bit deeper. So the way we've got to now is there's now a set of these infographics for each of the council's 4 priorities, and we also produce a set for the theme, the overriding theme of delivering the plan and delivering best value. And in addition, you'll see this year we've also produced a kind of supplementary set which highlight some of the work that the council's done, often in partnership with the community in response to the COVID epidemic. So you'll find the infographics as a whole in Appendix 1. And you'll see that as part of that continuing evolution I was talking about, and in direct response to some comments from the auditors in our Best Value Assurance Report, we also now include with each infographic some trend information. So it shows whether our performance is improving or not, and also if targets have been met. And in addition, we now give a link directly beneath each infographic to that further suite of information I was talking about. And I say this is key. Nothing is lost just because we now do this in this kind of bite-sized, publicly accessible format. All the information is still there. And that includes the suite of public performance reports that we do that focus on particular key areas of council business. That's all still available on the internet through a couple of clicks. Just to wrap up the report at 4.6, I make the point that the local government benchmarking framework indicator results won't be published until the start of next year. So they aren't included in this at the moment, but they will be added in probably in March when we expect to get them. And lastly, as you know, the Accounts Commission give a direction on public performance reporting to give us a guide on how it should be looking and how it should feel, and we expect that to be refreshed in December of this year, and I'll bring you more information on that to a future meeting. It just takes me to the recommendations, which are to note the infographics and to note that these will be published on the council's website probably next month, certainly as soon as you're okay with them. And over to any questions.
Thanks very much, Tom. I think I've said this before. I'm hugely impressed by the infographics that you and your team have produced. I think it's a really excellent way to get it over to the public and entice that initial interest and then manage to take it further when they see the links to the infographics. Now, I think it's a great job that you and the team are doing. Keep it up. I'll open it up to colleagues for any comments. I see Robert, you get your hand up.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. First of all, could I share your thoughts about that? I think this is very impressive, very easily read. I think it's very, very helpful as a sort of start point on this. It also, I think, indicates also the sheer volume of stuff that was done during the COVID crisis, or continues to be done during the COVID crisis, on grants and support and all of that of various kinds. It was just an enormous quantity of work that's been done by the council and its employees during the course of that particular time. I wanted to ask one particular thing, if I might, about some of the housing stuff. Scottish housing quality standards are reported there, and also the number of houses completed. I wondered, in fact, what the total was of houses towards the 1,000 target, which I think ends this year. And with regard to the SHQS, I wondered if we had any flavour of the remaining bit of 6.5% not done, because we're well past the target for that. And I just wondered if there was any kind of bits that sprung out of that we should be knowing about. Finally, if I may, the equivalent standard on energy efficiency isn't shown as an infographic. Is that one of the things that just isn't in our kind of targets to meet, or is there some reason for that?
Tom?
I would like to pass that to colleagues in housing. Unfortunately, I can't see the full list of attendees, so I'm not sure who's here from housing. Can I just make a general open up to anyone put their hand up?
Hi, Tom, it's Lynn Hayes. Sorry, my camera's not working. You won't be able to see me. On the total houses, I don't actually have that figure to hand, but I will get it for you. But we are on target and we are due to achieve the 1,000 homes. The date for that has been moved slightly just with COVID, so we've had a revised date in that, but I will confirm that when I get the detail. On the SHQS information, we do have 100% stock information available. So the remaining percentage, the 6.5%, is actually stock that's held in abeyance. So that means it's like door entry systems where we've got owners who have to agree to what the work that we're doing, or where tenants have maybe refused a heating system or whatever. And what we do with them is, as the programme develops, we complete them as they get to void stage. So they are on the programme to be done, and they will be, and we have got a programme of works for this year, hoping to get them. But as I say, there is other influences that we have to take on board. And lastly, on your energy question, it is in our resource plan, and it just wasn't put forward as an infographic. If it's something we want to do in the future, then that's no bother at all. We can add it.
It just strikes me with the climate change imperative and all that. The climate, the energy one is actually quite an important one. Yeah. Possibly to include if it can be. Thank you.
Okay, Alec.
Thanks, Chair. In section 3, the Sustainable Inclusive Economic Growth section, Tom, could you put into context at all almost halving the unemployed people gaining sustainable employment? Can you quantify at all how that was affected by COVID? Yet the number of people that we've supported has increased. And secondly, just a comment on the percentage of the road network resurfaced. Marginal decline, which I think needs to be highlighted, but I don't think I'm suggesting it's anything to worry about at the moment, dropping from 3.4 to 3.2. But when you're only repairing 3% of your road each year, it means a lot of it is going to be in a pretty poor state by the time you get to it.
Well, again, I'll pass to the experts on this one. I guess the first question would probably be to Pauline Elliott, like someone from the employability teams online, and then I guess it'd be Colin Parks for the roads question. Pauline, are you there?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to really highlight through you, Chair, Councillor Allison, is that this is not a normal year. Normally, our business support stats and targets would be based around assisting businesses to increase their turnover, increasing businesses that wanted to create new jobs and safeguard jobs, and wanted to either invest or expand within South Lanarkshire. Of course, nothing's been normal about the last 18 months, and the entire activity of the Economic Development Business Support Officers has been geared towards business survival and the administration allocation of the emergency COVID funding, and some of that is illustrated in the infographics that you've got before you. So huge amounts of money given out across the various categories, and often having to change and adapt at short notice as South Lanarkshire went up and down the various tiers of closure and opening, and different businesses became eligible for funding. So really, rather than concentrate on expanding work, the activity of the team has of essence been on enabling businesses to survive and getting through the pandemic. As we're now returning to normal, we are looking towards gearing up our business support programme around increasing employment, expansion, and supporting new sectors. And we were given some money in the last budget, and we're looking to employ a number of new business support officers, one to support social enterprises, one to support green businesses, a couple of staff to set up a membership tourism organisation. And we also have staff that we employed last year with our residual funding from the West of Scotland Loan Fund, again to concentrate on business support, but they have been tied up for the last 18 months in the COVID grant. So in essence, the last 18 months, it's about enabling businesses to survive, and now we're hoping to hit the ground running and help the businesses that have survived to expand their staff and turnover moving forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think there was another part to that question, Alec, wasn't there?
Chair, could Chief Exec might want to comment on the first part?
Chair, just to be helpful, and only because it was directly to hand as we're preparing for the first meeting of the Community Wealth Building Commission, to give a scale of the challenge that Councillor Allison alluded to. In March of last year, we had 7,045 people who were unemployed and claiming. That, as you know, almost doubled during the pandemic. The latest figures I've got is at the end of June, gone to 10,000, it dropped back to 10,830. So our unemployed claimant rate is about 5.4%. It's about 0.2% above the national average, which is the same as it was 0.2% above the national average in March. But it demonstrates the challenge that Pauline has referenced and the work that we'll need to do to support businesses both to sustain themselves and to also grow employment opportunities that we can then use our employability programs to kind of feed people through. So these are kind of stats and data that we're pulling together for the Commission's first meeting, but it was just a hand, and hopefully that's helpful for Councillor Allison.
Yeah,
okay,
thank you. The second part was to do with the road maintenance. I actually noticed that we reduced the target. I don't remember doing that.
I'll come in there, Chair, if that's okay. Colin Park here. I think the kind of points made by Councillor Allison are valid. The start of the year, pre-COVID, last year, I think we were looking to surface around about 4% of the road network. Obviously, when COVID kicked in, we took a kind of pragmatic approach, and bearing in mind the first 3 quarters of the year is when we make the biggest progress in relation to projects on the ground, and we lost the first quarter entirely. So non-essential construction activities were being discouraged, and we were just really focusing on safety defects. So that's when it was reduced from 4 to 2. Thankfully, as COVID progressed and we became more aware of how we could work safely, we had additional vehicles that we could go out and attend site. And I suppose people just became more comfortable with the working environment. We were able to increase the 2%, and we delivered 3.2% of our network at the end of the year. And what that kind of shows us, some of our road kind of hierarchy is improving, some are kind of plateauing a wee bit, and it just really highlights the need for kind of continuing sustained investment in the road network, which is something I'm certainly keen to do moving forward. So again, kind of valid points from Councillor Allison. I think overall, given what we had last year, and just echoing some of Pauline's comments, it wasn't a normal year, so to deliver comparable figures to what we did in 2019-20, I'm relatively comfortable with that, but there's a lot needing done still, and we need to have that sustained investment moving forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. Okay,
Thank
Alex.
you.
Right,
yes,
Peter.
Thank you.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just following on from Alex's question, Colin, about the roads network. Obviously, the roads have been pretty quiet over the last couple of years now, that would have been an ideal time to get, with minimum disruption, to get the roads network work done. What was it precisely? What was it within the COVID restrictions that stopped us from doing that?
The first quarter of the year, we were, I was going to say we were encouraged, but we were told to stop all non-essential construction activities. And that was largely that, included, for example, the project in East Kilbride at the Greenhills site. So that project closed down, I'm going to say, the back end of March, early April. And our focus was essentially on safety defects. So that was responding to, bridge strikes, major defects on the road. At the same time, though, our ability to actually do work on the ground, even doing some of the essential activity, was limited by the number of people in vehicles. So we couldn't, at that time, we didn't have safe systems of work. We didn't have PPE. Basic things like masks, hand sanitizer, those things were very much an evolving picture. So that was the main reason. However, as restrictions eased, PPE became available, additional vehicles were hired, and safe systems of work were developed. We were able to kind of ramp up the programme again. So the first quarter, essentially, we did nothing in terms of major projects, not just in the road network, on the kind of major improvement projects as well. But things improved, and we were able to turn it around our predicted 2%, and we delivered over 3%. So it was a very challenging time for all of us, as Pauline said again. It wasn't a normal year, but we did improve as we all became a bit more comfortable working with COVID. The important thing wasn't, as far as I'm concerned, last year delivering projects on the ground. It was the safety of our workforce and our communities going forward. And I think overall we did not too bad, as I said, in response to Councillor Allison's point. We delivered 3.2 last year compared to 3.4% the previous year in the context of COVID. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. I don't see any other hands raised. I would move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed? Thank you very much. Move on to item 4. And again, I think it's Neil to give us a report on the Council Plan Connect. Neil.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the next report is the Q4 progress report on the Council Plan Connect. It covers the period 1st of April 2020 to 31st of March 2021. So as we've just been discussing, it's a point in time where services and indeed our lives were very much impacted by the pandemic. And the report mentions this specifically at 3.3, where essentially says the council was forced to suspend or reduce a number of services, and those due to government advice and other factors. And so this has had an inevitable impact in performance, and you'll see that reflected throughout this report. It's a standard report that we bring regularly to the forum, and it follows the usual format, gives a bit of background to our performance reporting system, and then it gets into the detail of how the performance measures have turned out for the year, and that's there in section 4. So at 4.3, there is a table which gives you a quick understanding of what the RAG status is, or the RAG definitions are. And then at 4.4, we summarise the 98 measures that we are reporting this year against Connect in terms of their progress, and you can see how those have been progressing. So you can see from that table that about 78% of the measures are green or blue, which means essentially that they have been achieved or completed as expected. 15% of the measures are red or amber, meaning that we've deviated from our target or haven't completed quite as we expected. And 7% are report later or contextual. That generally means that we don't have enough information right now to tell you whether it's red, amber or green. However, when it's report later, we will come back at Q2 later in the year and tell you how those turned out. The remainder of the report goes into a little bit of detail. So the covering report gives you some achievements against each of the council's priorities, and those are shown there. Now, some of those may repeat items which are shown later in this report, or they may indeed have some of the items that are in the infographics, but there will be some new information there as well. And you'll see, as we've been saying, there's quite a lot of COVID relevant information there, and it gives a bit of context and a flavour of what the council has been achieving in this difficult year. The other point to pick up on in this report is that the measures, the 98 measures in the council plan, although summarised in the table at 4.4, they're all listed in Appendix 1. So that comes from the council's improved system, and they're all shown in detail with some narrative to explain why the performance is as it is. There's a second appendix to the report, and that's essentially there to show you where a measure has changed status from when we last brought it to you. So when we brought a report at Q2, if a measure, say, had been amber at that point, but is now green at Q4, then that will be shown in Appendix 2, and it's really just there to allow you to see those measures which have been changing over the course of the year. So I won't say any more about the report in general. I think there's a lot of detail in there. As usual, the recommendation essentially is to approve the content of the report and note the content of the report. I'm happy to take any questions on the content if I can answer them, but as usual, we have officers from around the council who can field questions if necessary. So thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Neil. I'm saying, is there any colleagues have their hands up? Yes, Maureen?
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes because I have another meeting, but just before I go, can I ask a quick question? It's on item 4.5.4 at the bottom of page 24. It's actually on page 25. And it's just round about the Health and Social Care Partnership, who, as we know, have done an astonishing job over the last 18 months, but the latest data there was to the end of 2020. So it would be good to know how this fits with the figures we've seen round about the health impacts coming out of the pandemic. Are these drops in the numbers due to the service simply not being available, or people not using health services because of all the efforts that have been directed at COVID? It'd be good to get a wee bit more context on that.
Neil, can you get someone to come back on that?
I can indeed. I'm not sure if Martin here.
Councillor Chalmers, thank you. Yes, the figures around some of the hospital activity that you're seeing, Councillor Chalmers, that actually now flipped almost. So in this given year, what we're seeing is quite a dramatic increase in things like emergency admissions and any attendances. So some of that was obviously down to the fact that the key messaging at that point was only attend hospitals if you're really unwell, etc. If not, then don't, because obviously a lot of the beds, etc., were obviously ring-fenced to deal with directly with the pandemic, etc. But there's actually quite a good report going to the IGIB this afternoon, which I'll maybe actually pop onto you, that gives some of the data around how that's changing in this current year. So the picture for previous year showed a decrease in quite a lot of the, what you would call the more core services for the NHS, but what they're actually showing now is almost a reverse trend. And what I would say is there's quite a lot of presentations within the hospitals with a degree of acuity is increased quite a bit. So the people turning up with multiple long-term conditions and also a level of unwellness, we're seeing that increasing quite dramatically. So that's going to present quite a challenge for us in the year ahead, or the year we're currently in, if that helps.
Thanks very much, Martin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Katie?
Thanks very much, Chair. With your indulgence, I've got two questions on two separate issues that I'd like to raise here, so I'll start with the first one. First of all, I would also echo Councillor Brown's comments on the previous article, that seen some of this laid before us just shows how much work was done in the council during the grips of the pandemic. I was looking at the education ones in particular. On page 24 of the actual report, there's the part about the Chromebook devices, which were distributed after we received funds from the Scottish Government. And I know that when that happened at the time, there was obviously a lot of work with schools to identify families at the time who would benefit from that. I just wondered that now that a lot of that work has taken place, are we analysing where those devices have actually been deployed, where they've ended up, so we have a better understanding of where that need was and perhaps still is, and how does that connect into some of the other work which I know we're doing on digital exclusion as well? I've got another question as well, Chair, if you'd prefer me to come back on that one.
Yeah, again, it's the first one first, and we'll come back in the second one, Kate.
Okay, I'm hoping Des is able to pick up on this one. Des?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And I think I would echo Councillor Loudon's comments, in the investment that has been made by Scottish Government and indeed the Council in digital platforms. I don't underestimate the challenge that presented to our schools, as all of a sudden schools were closed, and how would we connect with our families and young people. And all credit to our head teachers, to finance and IT and other colleagues, because that was a major job in trying to assess what is the need out there. So we spent some time at the beginning in reaching out through head teachers and our teachers in schools to identify what the needs were. And some of it's quite simple when you say it, but it's hard to do in reality. And actually, in actual fact, some of the discussions we had around, do young people and children, do they have access, first of all, to PCs and devices in their home that would focus on learning? And of course, the answer to that is yes, in some instances. But then again, we hit that parents were working from home. So could they get the advice, they could get hold of the device at the same time, etc. So there was a lot of energy put in by our schools to assess the need at the beginning. And we quite clearly, as Councillor Loudon has said, we've got a record of the Chromebooks that we've purchased and where they are, the 570 mobile devices. And that continues to grow because schools are using their PEF money and their School Attainment Challenge money to add additional value to that and to produce access more devices. So your question, Councillor Loudon, is a good one around our overview, is what we would like to say in terms of, do we have a record? Yes, we have a record in each school level. We continue to assess the demand, and we're actually monitoring the additional spend that we have through our equity team and through the School Attainment Challenge, so that we've kind of got records of where that spend is occurring, and you'll know that that's a continuous one. And again, I do genuinely compliment the approach that the authority's taken in terms of digital learning, because we are working in partnership with IT and obviously our partner providers, which made a significant difference to that. So yeah, a good question, and we will continue to monitor. And I think, Councillor Loudon, as you say, it's about focusing on the needs of the family or the children in the school, and that's where it is, so it's schools have been empowered to do that, and I think they're doing very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kate, you had another question, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Des, for that answer. A different subject, it's in the appendix, so it's on page 45. I'd like to ask about the review of town centre strategies. So the comment on that target just now was that the process remains ongoing in the light of the challenging situation, obviously related to COVID, and the uncertain timetable for returning to relative normality. Now that, fingers crossed, timescales look slightly less uncertain, do we have an update on what's the process for taking that forward now and the likely timescale for work to be completed? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Katie. Someone from Housing come in?
Thanks, Pauline Elliott.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, I think it is one from me. Thanks through you, Chair, to answer Councillor Loudon's question. The particular point in the report refers to the town centre strategies and action plans, which are a Scottish Town Partnership model where we produce an overarching strategy and then a detailed action plan in consultation with local communities and businesses. We've actually got 3 of those up and running, and with live action plans that are being monitored, and they're in Hamilton, Cambuslang and Larkhall. And we've got 1 in preparation for Blantyre, which we hope to bring to committee by the end of this calendar year. And then we'll look forward to which towns we consider next for that particular approach. But alongside that, these kind of formal strategies and action plans, the economic development team's been engaged in delivering Scottish Government funding. That's capital funding in our town centres, around 2 rounds of Scottish Government Town Centre capital grant funding, £500,000 of the Council's own capital programme that was dedicated towards town centres, and more recently the Scottish Government's place-based investment programme, which is a 5-year programme, and we're now in year 1, and that differs from the other programmes in that it's not just dedicated towards town centres, it's places more generally. And I can give Councillor Loudon the comfort that throughout all of these programmes we're delivering capital funding in excess of £17.4 million in 14 of our South Lanarkshire towns. And because the place-based investment funding is a 5-year programme, we'll be picking up projects in other towns moving forward. And in particular this year, the first year of place-based investment funding, some of the money has been set aside as a capacity building fund. That's to enable groups and businesses to work up projects for funding that they can then bring forward for further rounds, because one of the challenges about delivering this funding has been the tight timescale in which to spend it, and some communities haven't been quite ready, but the capacity building will enable them to be ready to bid for future years. And I'm pleased to report that a number of these projects are now very visible in our town centres and places. And just to cite a couple of examples, there's a building of social housing on the former advertiser building in Hamilton Town Centre, so much needed social housing and greatly improved physical presence in Hamilton. And then also the park conversion and rebuilding of the Royal Oak Hotel in Lanark Town Centre, former listed building and hotel, semi-derelict. We were able to retain part of the facade because Historic Environment Scotland wanted us to do that, and that's going to be a social housing project in association with Clyde Valley Housing Association. So it's going to look a lot better for local residents and businesses, but also people are going to gain much needed housing, and that's just 2 examples of the many. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Pauline, for that report. Are you okay with that, Katie? Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Pauline.
I see Alec has his hand up. Alec?
Yeah, John, page 3, for looking at the total household waste that is recycled. Improvement in the year, which is pleasing to see, but it's an amber target. What other work? I'm led to believe, I think I was given the figure of 5,000 residencies in South Lanarkshire that we don't offer any recycling facilities for. What work is being done to be able to extend that service to every resident in South Lanarkshire?
Right, okay. Who's going to come in on that?
That might be Ian Guild.
It might be, Tom, but it might not. My honest answer, Councillor Allison, is I don't have the answer, but I can go and speak to Kirsty Maguire on your behalf and ask her to feed back to you. Obviously, the household waste recycling centres, we had some issues with them back at through the early days of lockdown, but that was resolved. So there was always that opportunity for people to dispose of their waste through that. If you're actually just talking about providing bins, I know we've still got issues in places like East Kilbride, for instance, where terraced houses can't take any bins. So it's bags that we're providing there, and that's more just down to the makeup of the town in some places. So there are issues in certain areas that are just sort of symptomatic to those areas. But in general terms, I don't have an answer, but I'll get one for you and I'll get Kirsty to come back to you.
Ian, could you, when you're doing that report, could you let all members of the forum have a copy so that we can see what Alec was talking about?
Sure, we'll do.
Are you okay? That's great. You okay with that, Alec?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ian. Just, it goes a lot further than flats in East Kilbride. There are a lot of areas in the rural area that the service is not offered either. And the response I got the last time I asked was lack of funding to provide the extra vehicles, etc. So what I think might be beneficial as well for us is to find out what it would cost to give a full service within South Lanarkshire as well. Thank you.
Yeah, Ian, if you look at it just a wee bit more, fuller report, so that we've all got an idea just exactly the extent of this and where we're going with it. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks very much. I see that Peter has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. On the point that Alec just made there, not my question, but part of this is down to our carbon footprint. Where collecting recyclables is more carbon expensive than not. That'll play into Ian's answer, I'm quite sure. But anyway, I'm not an officer. I'll leave that up to them. The question I really wanted to ask again is on the carbon footprint, and I've lost my place in the papers. But page 14 in the infographics has a reduction of vehicle emissions for the council. And there's some very impressive figures there. However, those figures, obviously COVID's played a huge part in those figures. And I see 2021, it's almost a 28% decrease. However, with coming back to work normally and people going back to office again, how are we going to protect that figure and we don't see a 28% increase in the year to come? That's the question.
Chair, you probably want to invite Shirley Cleland to answer.
Yeah, Shirley.
Yep, thanks, Chair. The reduction of the 28% came about partly because we had the reduction in services. So there were some services like waste services that continued throughout, with services like grounds maintenance, street cleansing that supported other services. And then, as Colin said, there was parts of road services were suspended for essential reasons only. So the 28% won't be maintained going forward because the services have started to return. However, we are looking at how we can reduce emissions through using technology, agile methods of working, and how that will affect the vehicle emissions, building on some of the work that was done as a consequence of the pandemic. We've also got ongoing initiatives that includes the transition of electric vehicles to meet the 2025 targets of replacing the petrol and diesel fuel cars and small vans. We've also looking at other technologies for the heavier fleet, which is a longer term one about what could replace the diesel vehicles. We're also looking at how we can reduce fuel, and we're looking at using the telematics system at things like excessive speeding, engine idling, so things that won't actually affect the services, but it looks at driver behaviour. We'll also be looking, as the services return, about the fleet utilisation and ways to reduce the number of fleet. So there's a whole number of initiatives that were ongoing, but don't expect to see 28% next year because we had a lot of the services either reduced or suspended for a period of time, but we have got initiatives to keep building on what we achieved in 1920.
Okay, thanks for that, Chair. It's just it's hard work getting those emissions down, and hopefully we won't see a huge rise when everything starts to return to normal. But look forward to seeing some improvements. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter. Councillor Brown, Robert.
Yes, thanks very much, John. Could I come back on Alec Allison's point, if I may, about the recycling levels? Because I think it's actually slightly more fundamental than some of the discussion has been, in that we've had a major advance in terms of the blue bins and all that sort of stuff a little while back. That's kind of stuck on some of the tenemental buildings, and also, as I've discovered in my own ward, there's quite a number of little bits and pieces of terraced housing and other little bits like that which haven't been accommodated in the scheme either. Now, some of this with the tenements is to do with contamination problems and the sort of bin. We have a big bin, small bins, whatever. But I wonder if it's actually the time where we should have a comprehensive look at this in terms of what can actually be done to bring our recycling levels up further. I think we've still got some national targets that we need to meet anyway on all of this. I know there's some problems on this one. It's not an easy problem to resolve. But I would have thought actually we should now be in a position to look at what do we do with the tenemental buildings, what do we do with the remaining terraced houses and the bits, what's the sustainable thing there. Peter might be right, there might be some downsides to this as well, but for the most part I think it's organisational and how you actually manoeuvre the vehicles and the size of vehicles and things like that comes into it, as well as people behaviour and things. I just wonder, I don't know if anything like that's gone to the Community and Enterprise Committee at all, but I wonder if it's time to have that sort of slightly more comprehensive look at this particular issue. It was really quite an important one, I think.
Thanks, Robert. I think that's why I asked Ian to do a wee bit more fuller report than what Alec was asking for. Yeah, certainly I'm not against us having a real look at this and seeing if we can bring something forward to see if we can resolve this situation. Quite agree with you, it is a problem. And something we need to look at. So, yeah, I don't have any opposition to that at all, Robert. Okay, can we look at that, Ian, and see where we go with this? Okay?
Will do, Chair. Just to come back slightly on that, we did experience some of our less well-behaved residents behaving quite badly through the months of lockdown. So how the figures will look. Obviously, last year that there is a reduction. People had took to just throwing stuff out in the street, if you want me to be really blunt about it. Hopefully, now that we're into this year, when we see the next set of figures, there may be an improvement there just because people started behaving more responsibly as things open back up. So it may not be as dark as the figures relate, but I'll speak to the waste manager, I'll speak to Kirsty, because there may be things in the background I'm not aware of about how we look to take forward and increase levels. I'm pretty sure there'll be stuff in the background I'm just not aware of at this time.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I don't see any other hands raised. Can I move the recommendations? Can someone second it? Thank you very much. Are we agreed? I'm looking for agreement.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Right, we move on to the next item, which is the City of Aberdeen Council Best Value Assurance Report. And Tom, if you can give us a report on this, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm sure I don't need to remind anyone that we had our own Best Value audit back in the end of 2018 with the report coming to Council in 2019. And following that, this forum agreed that it would be useful if we brought forward to you a summary of other Best Value reports for other councils, just to give some context for what the South Lanarkshire report looked like. So on this occasion, since your last meeting, there's been one Best Value report published, and that was the City of Aberdeen's Council. So the summary key messages recommendations are at section 4, that's page 67 in your papers, and I would say it's a pretty positive Best Value report that Aberdeen City got. The bullet points you'll see there say such things as that the council has demonstrated significant improvements in key areas since its last report in 2015, that the council has ambitious plans, that the CMT shows clear leadership, that councillors and officers work together, and that the council works well with partners and communities. Of course, no one ever gets away scot-free in these things, so there are a few minor points made around funding in terms of reliance on non-recurring savings and use of reserves. And you'll see in one of the under 4.2 a point the auditors often make about engaging better with the community under the terms of the Community Empowerment Act. And that's it, really. That's the summary of their report there for you to note. And obviously, I'll try and take any questions if you have any.
Thanks very much. Does any colleague have any questions? Nope. Can we note the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. I think that concludes the business for today. I'd like to thank everybody for turning up and for your comments and contributions. And I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much. Bye.